I've almost blown speakers. If I didn't have a max set on my processor, there was one day where my dog was leaning a paw on the volume rocker on the remote. Hey guys, welcome back for another video. So with all the preliminary and prep, at least that I know of ahead of time out of the way, now the fun can start. I don't know which I'm more excited for, unboxing and taking a look at the Muse 16 or the test equipment coming later, because this is going to be the heart of the system and where all the joy comes from. But the test equipment is where all the experimentation and work is. And that's actually more fun to me than listening. So let's get this open. So I don't yet know if this is going to have just feet, just a rack ear kit, or both in it. I did reach out to the company and they're sending me, I think I mentioned this in the last video, feet for everything, but it wasn't clear if this was shipped with feet. So just to be sure, everything's coming. And right on top, we have another test/verification sheet. This one is measuring the analog total harmonic distortion. Say that 5 times fast. And that is, it says analog RCA in to XLR out at 1 kilohertz. And the factory spec is 0.02, and they measured 0.01, exceeding that. The digital total harmonic distortion, it says HDMI input 2 to XLR out at -20 dB at volume 50. Spec is 0.03, and they measured 0.01. Frequency response range plus or minus 1.5 dB analog RCA in to XLR out. Factory spec is 20 to 20. It's always better than 20 to 20. They measured 10, and I actually can't read that writing. It says greater than something kilohertz. Kind of looks like 50 kilohertz. Anyway, far exceeding the specs. And that's that for that sheet. And then we have the manual, which I've already gone through. Again, it's all online. Pretty standard stuff. Goes through what connections you can have and the power specs and all that. This is, again, completely encapsulated in thick foam. We've got an accessory box that we'll take a look at in a sec. 2 of them. Let me get this out of the way first. Now this, thankfully, is lighter than the amps. And then the other box, it just says power cord. And a third box hiding on the other side. This one says remote. I wasn't sure if it had a remote or not. I did read a really old article/review that said it came with, I can't remember the model, but it was an old Harmony remote, a universal remote, which I thought was kind of odd. I happen to use Harmony here for my whole system. So I was actually really glad to see that. That means codes are in the Harmony database, or at least it can be programmed. So no worries there. Yeah, this thing's, I'm not going to call it featherweight, but lighter than a bowling ball. And here we are. Got a sticker on the bottom. Take a look at the back end in a second. Looking at the front, I was actually expecting a little bit of protective film on the screen. I'm going to go through everything. Okay, there are no feet. Hang on. I'm going to go through everything after I just talk about what I'm seeing here, and I'm going to move the equipment over to my rack where I have a switch and I can plug things into Ethernet, because I believe, I know it doesn't have any wireless input as far as Bluetooth, AirPlay, that kind of stuff, but I believe it doesn't even have Wi-Fi in, just this Ethernet jack for control and, more importantly, configuration. It does have a web server built in, like virtually any upper-end receiver and any processor, and that's how you control it. So as you can see, the front, very simple. Same electronic switch that you find on the amps, and a touch screen. I'll plug it in and show it to you in a second. That's it for the front. Other than that, it just sits here and looks pretty. Same venting as the amps. Actually, the cases, I was going to say it looks almost identical, but it's a little bit smaller. Nothing on the top and bottom. All venting on their equipment is on the sides, so no need for any of the blower fans or anything like that that you find, well, at least back in the day, you used to find on receivers when they'd get super hot. Taking a look at the back here, we've got the same power in and rocker switch that you found on the amps, Ethernet port for connectivity to your network, serial jack for the older type of home control, 2 USB ports for programming. I would imagine those are either factory and or dealer only, nothing you would be doing anything with. Maybe they push out a firmware update that way, but that would be kind of weird. I would bet it's through the Ethernet. 2 12-volt trigger outs, which works perfectly for me since I have 2 amps to connect. I don't need to use a splitter. And the same trigger inputs for the processor, both a 12-volt and infrared. And then along the top, we have all the HDMI connectivity for the inputs and out. And those are 8 inputs and 2 out. I don't know if they are independent or if they just do mirroring or what. The 2 USB ports on this side are strictly power out, pretty standard, 5-volt, 2 amp, good enough for running things like streaming sticks and anything that you would normally plug into the back of a TV for power. And we have 4 digital inputs, 2 optical and 2 coax, and 2 sets of analog input. Now down along the bottom, we've got all the balanced outputs for your XLR connections, and you might notice there aren't 16 of them there. Because this is in a space-saving lightweight design, notice this guy right here. This is for a breakout cable, which I'll show you in a second, which gives you the other balanced XLR outputs. Now this right here is interesting. It's a digital down mix, both an optical and a coax. That could be very useful for people running transducers. In a nutshell, when you run transducers, what you're looking for is a really clean, completely unaltered signal going to the sub base, all the way down to 1 hertz, because you don't want any correction done to that when you apply it to your butt kickers or your Crosons or whatever you have, because those always play perfectly. There's no interaction with the room, so you don't want anything EQ'd to that signal. And a down mix might, it depends on the room correction and everything. Some processors and some room correction will allow the down mix to stay completely clean. It'll be interesting. I'll be playing with that later because I do have Crosons. But the other big function of a down mix is to take a surround signal and down mix it to, say, stereo. So it could be doing different things. Depends on their software. I just thought of one other very handy feature for a down mix, and that's if you run D-Box, because it requires it. They're kind of out of business-ish right now as far as home stuff, but that would be very important. Not a lot of processors have that. Mine doesn't. So inside the power cord box, I'm going to imagine it's another power cord. And inside the remote, I'm actually really curious what's in here. We've got 4 AA batteries, brand new sealed. What do we have? Does not feel or look like a Harmony remote. Looks pretty sleek and modern. Looks more like my LG, actually no, my LG, my old Sony remote. Okay, drum roll. Kind of looks familiar. It says URC as the brand on the bottom. I mean, it kind of looks like an older Harmony remote, but it's not. I'm not familiar with this one yet, but I will be. It's got a protective cover on the screen there and one for the transmitter. Is that a USB? Hang on. Oh, no, it's a little button for a, I'm assuming, backlight. It looks nice. It's plastic, but it looks like brushed metal on the front. Very nice feeling buttons. The D-pad is slightly concave. Thumb fits right in there perfectly. It's very comfy. We've got kind of a contoured cutout for your finger, and your thumb lands perfectly. It feels a lot like my Elite remote, but much taller. About the same weight. Got a power button, a system power button, some presets here on the side. I have to look this up. Totally new brand to me as far as a universal remote, but very nice. I was worried about that older article I read, and I was hoping that was just kind of outdated information. So let me put these batteries in real quick. Definitely changed the weight balance of it. Now it's very neutral. towards the center. And it's booting up. I got a welcome screen. Anyway, I'll go through all of that. Won't actually be using this much past probably the initial setup. I will very quickly add this into my Harmony network and just get everything working seamlessly. I never touch my equipment, my rack. It just sits there and works in the background. Most of my power on and power off routines are all voice command. Very rarely I'll hit a button, but for the most part, I just play, pause, back, okay, and volume. That's like 99% of my remote use for my system. Okay, last box. This should be the breakout cable. It says Tetra cable XLR. And it is. And that's all that's in that box. Very nice. We've got braided ends into the glossy metal and plastic XLR. And then here into the serial connector that will go in the back to be the breakout. And they are labeled aux 1 through 4. Nice length on them, about 1.5 feet. So you can run it wherever you need to. If you need to use this, if you don't need the other channels, well, you don't have to use this. That's all it is. And if you need more than 16 channels, they do have a big brother, and it's in a much fuller size chassis, no breakout cable needed, and it has a ton of more physical connectivity, both digital and analog. Of course, it costs more, but you do get a lot more option-wise in it. Same kind of performance, just more of the goodness. So with the breakout cable, you put this in here. This is all metal, by the way. And then just screw these down into the connectors. If you're my age, well, you know all about this because the computers you grew up on, this is how you connected everything. Your printer, your mouse, your older networking, your monitor. Pretty much everything was a serial bus type connector. Now I'm just going to plug this in so we can take a look at the screen. And let me flip this guy around. Now I'm assuming, because this will be the first boot, there's going to be some type of welcome or initial setup to go through. If there is, I'm not going to do that right here on the bench. I'm going to move it while I can connect it to the network. But I just want to power it up and show you the screen here in person. Rocker switch is off. All right, this will be the first boot. You guys are going to see it with me. I'm just kind of looking at my remote screen here because the camera's in front of the unit. Main power on, relay clicked. I see a little bit of life on the screen there. We'll see how long the boot goes for. One I have now is pretty long, about a minute and a half to actually get full boot. Little flip there on the screen after about 20 seconds. And another change. It's been about a full minute so far. Now, mind you, this cold boot process is only if it loses power or you flip the rocker switch. It should be in standby mode now. So let's try the momentary switch. And there we go. And it is a nice instant on. Heard another relay click, and we've got our controls. So there was no initial setup. It's just working. So I'm assuming now I can just connect it to my network, go to its web page, and start configuring. Let me flip around real quick. I want to play with the screen. Pretty nice. Not quite OLED levels of black, but it's even. Touchscreen takes some pressure. I can't remember the term for this. Capacitive touch. The screen is not, it doesn't feel like rigid glass. It's got that little bit of give. Feels like plastic. I mean, it feels solid, but it doesn't feel like glass. And you have to actually press with your finger just a little bit. It's actually just like my super automatic espresso machine. So I'm used to it, but it's not like a phone where you can just, ever so slightly touch the screen. So reading the manual, it does look like you can do everything from the touchscreen if you really want to. It's small, but it's easily legible. Actually, I want to go home. I want to, okay, that's nice. I was not concerned, but I was curious about the size of the volume display because, as I mentioned in the previous video, many processors, including this one, don't have an on-screen display for the volume. So you're dependent on either using the front panel here to see your volume, and obviously that only works if you have your equipment somewhere in your line of sight. I happen to. But if you don't, then you're relegated to using your home control if it's shown on your remote control, for example, or the app if you're using Harmony, something like that. There's just no way to tell your volume other than that. But man, just look at that screen, just making sure I didn't accidentally leave on a protective film. No, there's nothing on there. Anyway, that's nice. It's a large enough display. And I want to real quickly just look at brightness levels. Right there, that should be it. There we go. Cool, it's on medium. Because it really does look like medium right now. What's auto do? Is there a light sensor on here? Oh, okay, that was a little delayed reaction there. Now it went dim. What are you doing? That's not me, I'm not doing anything. Is there a sensor? It's got to be a light sensor somewhere. Is this it? Was it reacting to the shadow of my arms from my studio lights in here? I think it is. It's not super quick. That's what was throwing me. It reacts quicker going bright than dim. I don't know. Anyway, that must be a receiver, not only for the light, but probably infrared as well. So that's cool. I would probably leave it on. Let me see how easy it is to read on low. Medium is probably going to be where I'm going to set it because I've tinted the front glass of my rack so I don't see lights, and it's only things that I purposely turn up that go through the tint. So actually high is comparable to how I have mine set now. That'll probably look great, but that's perfect. Those three settings are all most people are going to need, and it's really neat that they have an auto. I don't recall seeing other units that have auto. I'm sure they do, but that's cool. Timeout. I bet that's like a complete blackout. Mine doesn't have that, so I have to have it on all the time, but I've got it set just dim enough where you don't notice it unless you're looking straight at it. Like you can't see it in your peripheral vision. So that's probably always on. Let me just set the 1 minute to see if the whole thing shuts off after a minute. Hey, there we go. So that is what it does. Let me make sure what I'm seeing here is the unit, or it might be my lights, because I've got some backlights on here and they might be bouncing. Because when I do this, it actually looks a lot blacker. I was just thinking about my comment that it's not OLED black, and it didn't really make sense that there would be a backlight showing. Hang on. Ha, yeah, totally my mistake. That was just my lights catching it at some weird angle. It is pitch black. Let me turn it back on. I think just tapping it should do it. Yep. Okay, yep. There is a tiny bit of backlight there, but it is not at all what I thought it was. Now, interestingly, straight on, it is very black. However, if you go just off angle, unfortunately, I am actually seeing a backlight. Let me go vertical. I'm just going around the unit here behind the camera. Vertical is good. So this is probably a VA panel, I'm imagining. Now, I have noticed that their design philosophy of their GUI and everything seems to be what I'll call minimalistic. There isn't a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of extra stuff displayed. And you'll see this I1, all of the inputs are just I1 through whatever, right? You can't rename them. Most processors, you can name stuff whatever you want. Like mine, for example, I've got inputs for PC, or named, I should say, PC, Apple TV, Roku, Shield, Ugoose, bunch of others, game, a bunch of different customizations like that. And there's none of that here. However, I don't really care because all that is displaying something on the screen. And like I said earlier, I never touch my system. I don't even look at the system in my rack. Now I will be for volume, but as far as the name goes, I don't care because I'm not using this to select my input. I'm using my remote or voice. So At first, I thought that was kind of a weird thing, but it's a total non-issue. So I'm not going to go through this here. Let me now put this on the rack and plug it into the Ethernet, and I'll show you all the configuration actually on the web server. So it'll be a lot easier for you guys to see. Now, ideally, they would push out a firmware update, and just note, at least looking on the camera here, these rings are a little pink. They are pure, normal looking red in real life. They look very nice. But ideally, I would like a firmware update to toggle these lights off, or at least super dim them or something. They're real similar to the power light on my monolith amp, and to get rid of that, because it doesn't have any options, I just have a blackout sticker on it. I'll put a link down to those. They're both tinted and pure black, and they take care of screens, buttons, lights, status bars, anything that you don't want to see or notice. All different types of shapes. You don't have to do any customization. You get a nice big sheet, and they're super cheap. It's just like tinting your car window, and you can stack them too to customize every look of every piece of equipment. But let's power on. Let's do an amp first. Silent just comes up into the ready mode. And this I already booted. Obviously, it's got power. So this should instantly turn on the screen. Click of the relay, and we're good. All right, now I only have one external Ethernet cable in my rack here, so I'm going to do one device at a time as I connect them. So full disclosure, when I do these kinds of videos, they're always completely unscripted. And usually you're seeing what I'm seeing real time, first impressions, honest, true reactions. This is not the first time I have been in the web interface or the main settings. I spent hours over the last day troubleshooting a problem that was like a ghost in the system, all 3 units. The company didn't know what was going on, so I knew it was something local. It was common to all 3 units. Too long didn't read. You can't use ad blockers on your browsers to access the web interfaces. I have, between my machines and browsers and OSs, Safari, I tried Chrome, Firefox, Edge, AdBlock Pro, UGen Origin, and here on iOS, Wiper. All combinations just completely messed it up. I was able to use the whitelist on UGen Origin on Chrome, and everything works fine. But AdBlock Pro and Wiper, I have to actually turn the extension off. So if you have some weird results and you're trying to use the web interface, turn off your ad blockers and give that a shot. I went through my whole network before I figured that out. So let's get into the web interface here, and I'll show you what I did. It's really simple. First thing you have to do after you plug your units in is give them an IP address. I fully manage my network. I simply went in and reserved an IP address for each device as they connected. How you do that completely depends on your router and your network. If you need to find the device, they put a MAC address sticker on the back, and they have a free tool on their website to easily identify their devices on your network so you can get the information you need. And then all you do is go to the IP address of each device. So this is amp number 1, and this is a screen. You just have basic controls here. The temperature is the internal temperature of the amp. The master mute up there, A stands for all, I'm assuming, and then you have channels 1 through 8. I don't know what the M stands for. Oh, mono. Mono. Just figure that out. Anyway, if you want to bridge a channel, or a pair of channels, I should say, all you do is tap that. So I'm going to bridge 6 out of 8 of these channels to run my left, center, right. All I'm going to do on that number 1 is tap the M, and now it's bridge. And you notice number 2 disappeared. So all I have to do is do the same thing for 3 and 5. And now we're good to go. Now I'm just going to go switch my Ethernet cable because I've only got one free at the moment in my rack. I'll go to the other amp. Well, technically I've already done it. Assign that an IP address reservation. That one I'm leaving alone because I'm going to use those individual channels to run all my surround and Atmos channels. Now I'm going to go actually plug it into the Muse, and we'll take a look at that. Up at the top, you need to press the power button first. And then you have pretty much a mirror of the front display. What they've done is put most of the controls that you're going to be using after you set up the basics here on the web interface. It's not everything. If you need all the controls, you have to use the front display, but those are things that you're just going to set once and never have to touch again. Preferences and that type of thing. So on the menu here, we've got basically the same thing as hitting the little settings gear icon in the corner. That's all that does for here. Hitting the speaker icon, we've got all the basics of how you can set up your system. Now, mine is set up as a 5.2.4. And after I get inputs and everything coming in and we see content coming in videos coming up, you'll see even more information. Right now there's no room correction, I should say, and all these parameters are stock out of the box. It's not how I'm going to run it, but I am going to test just without anything configured and no room correction. So I'm just leaving everything right now. We'll go into this in detail as I actually go through it in future videos. But up at the top, you've got your volume and mute. Speaking of volume real quick, while I'm in here, I do have to note that they are missing a convenience feature that I think is very important. They do have a set maximum volume, so you can limit this. I believe it goes up to 99, but you can limit this to a maximum volume, which is absolutely critical. You know, like I've almost blown speakers. If I didn't have a max set on my processor, there was one day where my dog was leaning a paw on the volume rocker on the remote, and it went all the way up to max. She got scared and jumped down, and I'm in the kitchen wondering what the heck is going on, and I had to run over to the unit itself and dial down the knob. So if you don't have a max volume set, that is extremely detrimental in worst case. But here's the feature that's missing: power on volume or power on max volume. That's something critical. When I'm done watching something, say a movie, I might be at volume 62, for example, and the normal watching TV volume might be 40. So if I don't dial down this volume manually before I turn off the system, when my wife comes in to watch her whatever show's next, it's going to blast her out of the seat. So it would be a very simple firmware change to give us an option here to set a max power on volume. That's something I've had in almost every single receiver and processor going back as far as I can remember. And while I remember it, I do have to mention one minor thing. They do call this a dual HDMI out device. They have 1 and 2. It is really not. You only want to use number 2 because HDMI 1 is only limited to HDMI 1.4, which is useless. You can't pipe anything copywritten. And they do note in the manual that it's only for diagnostic and test purposes. And it is also only HDMI 2, not 2.1. So going back through the menu, we have options here for turning on or off dynamic range control, which is good for, say, listening at night, and you don't want huge explosions. You don't want to have to stress to hear really low dialogue. It kind of evens everything out. Center spread is spreading the actual center audio to your left and right mains. So it can help you if you have a hard time listening to dialogue, especially if it's quiet. I don't tend to use those, but in some rooms it can be important. Hitting DTS here, same thing. They just give you dynamic range control only for DTS content. This little factory in the corner is your factory reset or restore. Hitting the network bottom button gives you the information about the unit itself. And that is about it. Everything else is through the center panel. So that's it for the web interface. It's really simple. It works great. Probably not going to use it, but it's there if you like that kind of thing. That's going to wrap it up for this video. The next one is going to be hooking some stuff up and doing some 2-channel testing. See you next time.